So in Java, can you tell me what is abstraction in Java?
Abstraction is where you share the relevant details with the client of the class, and you hide the irrelevant details. So you just share the detail which is required for the client. Example, you are making a call from one of the classes. You just give the method name and the parameters that needs to be passed. Consider sorting. So you get list in the sorting method, and how sorting happens, that is abstracted. So this is abstraction in Java.
So how do you achieve abstraction?
There are two ways for achieving abstraction. We can achieve abstraction using abstract class, and or we can achieve abstraction using interfaces. I generally use interfaces for abstraction in Java.
Okay, so what is interface?
Interface is a contract where the class that implements the interface has to bind with that contract. Consider an interface, for example, flyable, which has the fly method. So if bird implements flyable, then bird has to give implementation of the fly method. So it is a contract that class has to bind with.
Okay, so do you know the features which are available in Java 8 related to interface?
In Java 8, there are several features in interface. The most prominent one is the default method, which is added to the interface. Now you can add default methods to the interface. There is also a feature where you can add a static method to your interface. And finally, there is a concept of functional interfaces, where you have only one method defined in the interface. So these are the three new things added to Java 8.
Okay, let us consider a scenario. I have two interfaces, interface I1 and interface I2. Both are default method. Let us say print. Okay, print is method name. Then in I2 also I have a default method which is having same signature as in I1.
Okay.
Now there is a class who is going to implement both the interfaces.
Okay.
So from that class, how I will identify, suppose I wanted to call a method which is available in I1, print method which is available in I1. So how can I call this method?
Okay, so you have two interfaces. One is I1 interface, one is I2 interface,
Yes.
and both the interfaces have same method name, which is print. And there's one class that implements both the interfaces. And
Yes,
you want to call the method of I1 from that class. Am I right in understanding this?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. In this case, you can call the method. Is the method static, or is the method non-static?
Both are default methods.
Both are default methods.
Default methods.
Okay. Then I can do I1 dot super and dot print. I can call I1 dot super dot print.
Okay, fine. Do you know inheritance in Java?
Yes, inheritance is where you have a parent class and you have a child class that extends your parent class. That means consider a car class, and there is Audi class which extends the functionality of car class. This is known as inheritance in Java.
Okay, what are the different types of inheritance?
There are 2 or 3 types of inheritance. One is single inheritance, where a class just extends the functionality of the parent class. Where consider an example car, and your Audi or Mercedes extends the car class. This is known as single inheritance. And there is a multi-level inheritance, where you have consider a class, consider class A, and then consider class B that extends class A, and finally consider class C which extends class B. So there are 3 levels here: class A, which is parent; class B, which is child; class C, which is grandchild. This is known as a multi-level inheritance. And then we have hierarchical inheritance, where consider a class vehicle, and then we have car which is extending from vehicle, and then we have bike which is extending from vehicle, then we have 3-wheeler or rickshaw which is extending from vehicle. So this is hierarchical inheritance in Java.
Okay, fine. What is a string in Java?
A string in Java is a sequence of characters, and you can represent your name, or you can represent your address using the string.
Okay. So how do you create strings?
There are two ways which I used in my project. One is string str is equal to in double quotes hello is one way where we are directly specifying the literal in double quotes, and there is one more way which is string str1 equal to new string, and then I pass the actual string which is hello. So one using literal and one using the constructor. So these are two ways in Java.
Okay. So when you create a string by literal, do you know where it gets stored in memory?
The literal strings, I think, are stored in string constant pool, and the string that you create by using new constructor, new string method, new string constructor are stored in your heap memory.
Okay. Okay, fine. So we normally say that string is immutable, right? So what is mean by immutable?
Immutable is once the string gets created, the content of that string does not change. So if you want to change the content of the string, a new instance of the string gets created. So consider an example, string str equal to hello, and then I do string str plus um, some name, example Sachin. So new string will be created, which is hello Sachin. The previous hello string is not affected at all. It remains hello itself. So this is immutable strings.
Okay. Do you have used collections in your project?
Collection, yes, I've used collection.
So what are the collections which you used in your project?
I used hash map. I used array list. I used linked list in my project.
Okay, so can you tell me what is the difference between array list and linked list?
Array list provides you random access. So you when you access any element, the 10th element from the array list, then it directly goes to the 10th element because it uses the underlying array for implementing the array list. And linked list is where when you ask for the 10th element, it starts from the first element, then it goes from first element to the second, then to the third, and it reaches 10th element. So this is the main difference, where if the retrieval is your priority, you want to retrieve elements frequently, then go for array list. And if you want to add elements frequently, then go for linked list. And if you are adding a lot of elements in between, then array list is not a good choice, because if you keep on adding elements in between the array list, then you have to reshuffle the array every time. So if the retrieval is the priority, then I'll go for array list. Frequent retrieval results in array list. And if adding elements is the priority, then I'll go for the linked list.
Okay. Can you explain me the internal working of hash map?
Yes, hash map internally uses buckets. So consider for our example, hash map uses many buckets, but for our example, we'll keep it to 10 buckets. And when I try to add some objects to my hash map, hash map tries to find the hash code of that object. And suppose the hash code is 18, for example, then hash code, and we have 10 buckets, then hash code will mod your 18 with 10. So the remainder is 8. Now that object will go to 8th bucket. Okay, when the next object comes, consider an example, the hash code is 12. It will try to mod with 10, and now it will be stored in the second bucket. So this is about adding objects to the buckets. And when you are trying to retrieve the object, and you again ask for the object, and it goes there and tries to find the hash code, it finds the hash code as 18, it again does mod 10 and directly go to the 8th bucket to retrieve your object. So this is how hash code internally works.
Hello?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
there.
Yeah. So do you know multi-threading? Have you
Multi-threading.
worked on multi-threading? Yeah.
Yes, I have used multi-threading a bit in my project.
Okay. So can you tell me a thread life cycle?
Yes. So when you create your thread, at that stage, your thread is in new state. When you call the start method on your thread, it enters your runnable state. And when your thread actually gets the CPU cycle, that means when your thread starts executing, at that point, it is in running state. After while running, it might go into the waiting state or blocked state and come back to running state once again. And once the thread finishes its execution, it goes to the terminated state. So these are the life cycle states of thread.
Okay. So how your thread goes into a waiting state?
Waiting state, when thread goes into waiting state, at that point it releases the lock, and then it goes to the waiting state, and it gives chance to other threads to do its work, and until a specific condition is met, the thread one remains in the waiting state, and if that condition is met, then the other thread notifies the threads, and then T1 comes back to the running state. So consider an example. Thread T1 wants to access some element from the queue, but queue is empty at the moment. So this thread will go into the waiting state. The other thread which adds the elements into queue, so that thread will add some elements to your queue and then notify the queue that is waiting. Then thread T1 will come back and consume the element from the queue. So this is how wait works in Java.
Okay. Okay, fine. Let us consider I have to sort some elements. So you might have idea about comparable or comparator interface, right?
Yes, I have idea about comparator.
So can you tell me when we should go for comparable and when we should go for comparator?
Yes, when you want to do natural ordering. So for example, natural ordering is 1, 2, 3, 4 for numbers, A, B, C, D for your characters. In that case, I'll go for comparable. And if I want to do custom ordering, in that case, I'll go for comparator. And your comparable has compare to method, and your comparator has compare method. So in short, for natural ordering, I'll go for comparable interface, and for multiple custom ordering, I'll go for comparator interface.
Okay, fine. Do you know marker interface?
Marker interface is the one that does not have any method present in it, and it is used to provide hints to JVM, but there is no method present in the marker interface.
Okay, so is there, if there is no method available inside your marker interface, then what is the use of marker interface?
Marker interface is used to provide hints while you are coding. Suppose you are coding, you are trying to you want to check if the object has permission to do something. In that case, if your object implements permission interface, which will be a marker interface, then you will allow to perform certain operation. And if your object or class does not implement the permission interface, then you will not allow that class to do that operation.
Okay. Okay, fine. Do you know serialization?
Yes, I have worked on serialization. Yes.
So what is the use of serialization?
Serialization is when you convert your object into byte stream. So if you want to convert the object in the heap into a byte stream, then I'll use serialization from Java.
Okay. So do you know serial version UID, which we normally use in serialization?
Yes. So suppose there is a class, and there are 3 or 4 fields in that class. So based on the information about that field, the data types of the field, and the name of the fields, the serial version UID is generated by your Java utility. So serial version UID represents the metadata about your class, and if you change the class, the serial version UID will be changed.
Okay, fine. So I guess we are good with Java. Let's move to the Spring Boot. Okay, so can you tell me how do you monitor your Spring Boot application?
Monitoring Spring Boot we monitor our Spring Boot applications using Actuator. There is something called as Actuator, which provides a very good idea of how the application is performing, or what are the errors that are occurring in the application, what resources it is consuming at the moment. So we use Actuator for monitoring our Spring Boot applications.
Okay, fine. Suppose your application is not performing or not working as expected. Okay, So
Mhm.
it may be happening that your application is down, or maybe it may happen that your application functionality is broken. So in that case, you need to check the logs, right? So how do you check the logs?
We check the logs using Splunk. So there is a concept of forwarder. So whenever there is some problem with the application, the forwarder forwards the error to the Splunk, and then Splunk provides one URL on which you can go and hit the URL from your browser, and you can get logs. And there is also filter criteria. If you want to just look at errors, you want to skip warning, you can do that with Splunk. So Splunk is a utility which helps in seeing or managing the logs with Spring Boot application.
Okay, do you know vertical scaling and horizontal scaling?
Yes, I know vertical scaling. Vertical scaling is where you are increasing the capacity of your machine. So, for example, if your machine is running 8 GB of RAM, and if your application wants more memory, in that case, you will go and replace that 8 GB with the 16 GB RAM. So, and then if it needs even more memory, then you will go and replace 16 GB with 32 GB RAM. So this is vertical scaling. Now horizontal scaling is where your application is running on 8 GB machine, and if you want to scale horizontally, at that stage what you will do, you will add one more 8 GB machine, and there will be two instances of your running application. And if you want even more memory, then you can add third machine which is of 8 GB, so you will have three machines which are of 8 GB. So this is how we achieve horizontal scaling.
Okay. So how do you deploy your applications if you are scaling your application horizontally?
Okay, deployment, we generally deploy using Tomcat. So as it is a Spring Boot application, it has embedded Tomcat. So every application is a standalone application with its own URL. So we use Tomcat for deploying the applications.
Okay. So you must be using application.properties or application.yaml file to mention the properties, right?
Yes, we are using in some application we are using application.properties, and in some application we are using application.yaml.
Okay. Okay, fine. So can you tell me why, when we should use application.properties or when we should go for application.yaml? Which one should be used?
I'll generally, when there are a lot of embedded properties, for example, a.b.c.d. So these are embedded properties where d lies after a, b, and c. So here I'll go for YAML, because I'll write a, then below that using tab character or tab structure, b, then c, and finally d. And if there are multiple properties below c, then I can just go and add the properties. With application.properties file, you have to repeat the entire prefix structure again and again. So you have to write a.b.c.d, a.b.c.e. So where there is a lot of repetition. So if there is a lot of repetition, I'll go for YAML.
Okay. Okay, you have mentioned microservices as well in your CV. So do you have a work hands-on experience or just knowledge?
I have hands-on experience in this project. We are migrating from our monolithic application to the microservices architecture.
Okay. So can you tell me what is API gateway in microservices?
API gateway is where before the call reaches your microservices, it first goes to the API gateway. API gateway you can consider as a doorway to your microservices. And we in our project we started using Zool as the API gateway, which is the most famous API gateway. So you can provide some common functionalities in your API gateway. For example, you can provide authentication, or you can check if your user has authorization to access some of the microservices, or you can do some logging if which user has access which microservice. So that is where we can use API gateway.
Okay. How your services are communicating with each other?
We are using service discovery for doing communication between microservices. So if there is a microservice A which wants to communicate with microservice B, then A will not directly call service B. A will go to service discovery to get the URL of service B, and then service discovery will provide the URL of service B, and then A calls B using that URL. So we use service discovery, and we use in my earlier project we were using Eureka, but in this project we are using Consul service discovery.
Okay. Okay. So do you know what is Hystrix?
Yes, Hystrix is used to make your application fault tolerant. So consider there are cascading calls of microservices where your microservice A calls your microservice B, and microservice B calls your microservice C. And if microservice C fails, then your microservice B fails, and if your microservice B fails, then your microservice A fails. So this is cascading failure, which we generally see in our microservices world. So to avoid this problem, we use the framework known as Hystrix, where if microservice C fails, then microservice C returns the default response, and it does not mark itself as failed. It gives the default response. Microservice B takes the default response and gives it back to microservice A. So the cascading failure is stopped and our microservices become fault tolerant. So this is where we use Hystrix.
Okay. And how do you achieve the loose coupling between two application or two services?
A loose coupling is when suppose you have two microservices. One is your buyer microservice, and the other one is your payment microservice. So what I'll do to make these two microservices loosely coupled is I can introduce I think a queue between these two microservices where the buyer microservice will publish a message on the queue, and the payment microservice will read the message from the queue. So even in some cases, if the payment microservice is down, so it will process the payment once the payment microservice comes back. So this is how I will remove the coupling between two microservices.
Okay. Okay, I'm done from my side. Do you have any question?
When will I is there any idea of when I'll get the results of this interview?
So basically I will share the feedback with HR, and HR will get back to you.
Okay. Yes, so that's it. I think I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Thank you.